Alright guys, welcome to the Hollywood Mechanic. Today we're going to talk about possible do-it-yourself gone wrong. Alright, so what we're going to talk about today is the possible drawbacks of doing a job yourself. And this also kind of goes along with finding the wrong tech to do your work. Basically, if you're saving money, there's a reason you're saving money. And that, with do-it-yourself, comes because you're trading your own time for money. Now, if you're making $25 an hour at Starbucks on the weekends and you've got a car that they're going to be charging you $180 an hour to service, then it may make sense for you to take the weekend and do an oil change yourself. But you, again, are trading your time. And just keep in mind, if something goes wrong, then you've got to pay someone who knows what they're doing more than they would have charged to do it originally. And that's not out of spite. I don't look at it, give a quote for a job, and then 2 weeks later the client comes back and they've messed up the job themselves, or some other tech has messed it up, so I charge them more out of spite. It's because once someone else's hands have been in a job, every step of the job takes longer because I have to verify that everything has been done correctly. And most of the time the car comes back in pieces, and then I've got to figure out how to put things back together. Believe it or not, the master techs don't have memorized every job on every car that they work on. We typically take things apart very carefully and remember how they came apart so that we can put them back together very carefully. And years of experience teach us where we need to look up specific torque values or specific procedures, but a good technician does not go to the repair manual and go step by step through that process. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. One reason is the repair manual was written by someone at the beginning of the car's release for techs to immediately begin repairing vehicles, and it's not always the fastest way or the best way. Sometimes they tell you to take off too much or go a different route than what makes the most sense later. Typically, a good mechanic will look at a system, determine why he's going to choose the path that he's going to choose, whether it's safer from like a standpoint of possible damage to other parts or just a time constraint, and then he's going to choose that route and carefully pay attention to every step. So when we're watching or coming back to repair a job that someone else has touched, all those options are out the window, and now we're oftentimes having to play engineer and figure out what's happened. Now on this R8, the car came in and it wouldn't move under its own power. And it seemed like the clutch was bad. No check engine codes, no transmission codes. There was no metal in the fluid, no grinding, just no movement when we released the clutch. I quoted the job, and then they dropped the car off. All right, so immediately upon drop off, I tried to pull the car into the garage, and I noticed a very spongy brake pedal. And that's not normal, but I do know right away that the brake reservoir and the clutch reservoir are the same. Knowing that the clutch doesn't work and has completely melted on a car with 16,000 miles, and we've got spongy brakes, indicates that there may be a problem with the brake fluid reservoir, air in the system, something gone wrong. Now, I called the client, told them, hey, there may be some other issues. We're gonna have to address it as we go. Now, I've put the new flywheel and clutch in, and I go to bleed it, and as you're gonna see here, the windshield is cracked. Now, I knew the windshield was cracked coming in, I documented that, but I didn't pay attention to where the crack originated from. And so as you can see here in this photo, it comes from someone seemingly trying to pry off one of the windshield wipers, putting the pry bar against the glass, and then cracking the glass. So at that point, I tried to remove the windshield wiper properly without a pry bar, and it does not seem to want to come off. I looked more closely at the windshield, and I see a scrape mark where when the windshield wiper runs, it's scratching the glass on top of the crack due to what I believe is a lower position of the wiper blade because of the damage on trying to remove it, maybe hitting it with a dead blow hammer or pushing on it. So at that point, you know, I spent about 30 minutes trying to get it off, and I was like, you know, now I'm gonna have to start charging more to do this. I went to go take off the passenger side windshield wiper blade, and that one just broke off immediately. There's solidly rusted through stud there, so it has been broken for a while. It's not something I did, but now that wiper blade is broken off, and so at that point I decided I'm not going to try to remove the wipers to access the brake reservoir, and instead I removed the front trunk. And once I got under there, I see that there's no brake fluid in the reservoir. And I also noticed there's damage on the hood and the front passenger headlight. So most likely what happened is the guy was driving the car, went to hit the brakes, and the brakes just didn't provide stopping power they're designed to due to air in the system, and hit something. And then also the clutch probably was not fully disengaging when shifting gears, allowing the wheel speed or transmission speed to be different from the engine and not a complete disconnect between the two when the gears are being changed, which would cause a lot of slippage, a lot of heat, and completely lunch this clutch. So all that to say, this guy went to someone who was not quite qualified to do this job, and he probably saved money there, or he did it himself and saved money there. But now I have to charge not only to do the normal clutch job, but my labor rate to now remove the front trunk boot, spend half an hour trying to figure out windshield wipers. Now I have to bleed not only the clutch, but all 4 wheels. I can't let the car go, knowing that there's still air in the brake system. So now the car has to be put up, all 4 wheels come off, VAGCOM hooked up to do a bleed for each corner, and then bleed the clutch as well. And it put a total freeze in the process of the clutch because I couldn't just put it back together without getting clearance for these things. So it's been a big headache. So just keep in mind whenever you're making that decision to go to someone, if it's a complex job and you've watched YouTube videos and you think you can do it yourself, just keep in mind you may end up losing not only your time, but doubling the cost of the repair, having to replace parts multiple times, and then still pay an inflated rate. So just keep that in mind whenever you're about to approach a DIY job.